Well, ladies and gentlemen, the most South African day for news that I could possibly think of. But before we get on to the main news of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And, I like to see those numbers grow. So subscribe, baby. Click the bell icons. So let's get on to the news of today. Well, Old Mutual warns that South Africa will never reach the 5 to 6% growth rate it needs. At best, it's going to get 2.5 to 3%, which is going to fall far below what it needs to reduce poverty and unemployment. And would you know it, the structural constraints that is stopping us getting our growth rate includes overregulated labor laws, skill shortages, and poor infrastructure. Things such as BEE and all the other red tape that the government loves to put on the state. Now, what we do know is that we've achieved an average growth rate over the last 16 years of just 1.1%, the smallest in any emerging economy. Well done, Cyril Ramaphosa. But Cyril Ramaphosa is very happy because he has celebrated, and I quote, he celebrated the declining white and Indian household incomes, calling it progress in racial income equality. Now, you see, the reason he says this is because, according to him, black incomes have grown, and that's shortened the gap between white income and black income. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, this is not true, because you see, what's actually happened is white people and Indian people have become poorer. And so because of that, their income is getting closer to the black income because they don't have as much money. Now, very interestingly enough, if you actually look at the statistics, the average income and what it's worth now towards dollars has greatly shrunk, thanks to the ANC's government. A good few years ago, in terms of dollar ratios, when you converted it into dollars, the amount of money that you held in terms of income was 3 times greater in terms of value than it is today. So technically, your money is now worth 3 times less, thanks to an ANC government. Congratulations, ANC. But it's nice to see that Cyril is just such a racist guy. Like, it's hard to not look at some of the things he now says and just say, God, you just don't like white people, right? It's just racial hatred. But in any case, he said this at the Black Economic Forum, where he was celebrating just how wonderful BEE is for the economy. Because 1.1% growth rate just says, like, brilliant. It does to this freaking retard, because he got richer while everybody else got poorer. Well done, you freaking cretin. In any case, let's move on to the most South African news story I could find of today. And that was actually the news story that SAA posts a 354 million rand loss for the year 2023 to 2024. Now, if you actually notice the news that accompanied this, now a few months ago, they did a news article where they basically said SAA was in the positive. It was actually making money. And then it turned out, according to the accountants, they actually did audited accounts. And what they actually did is that they found that there was an accounting error, just a small one of 431 million. And this actually meant that after it was taken into account, SAA didn't actually make any money at all, even though they told us all before that it was good news, it was all back into productivity. And yeah, apparently now it's actually in the red of 354 million rand in losses. It's going to need more government bailouts, I suppose. In any case, let's move on to the news that apparently South Africa needs 4 to 5 trillion rand in infrastructure investment. Yep, 4 to 5 trillion rand. Wow, that's a lot of money. In any case, government seeks 4 trillion rand from the private sector because it can't raise the money itself. And they looked at the private sector and they're like, you guys got money? Can we have that money? And apparently, yeah, the government's asking the private sector to help them, fix the country that they destroyed. Now, according to the government, there is over 1.2 trillion rand in corporate cash reserves available for them. They're all just untapped. I mean, that's 1.2 trillion just sitting right there for your business. And, according to the government, that money could be used to unlock massive job creation and growth and all the reforms that the country needs. But the problem is, government, once we put it in your hands, you screwbags are going to loot the living daylights out of it, buy lots of Johnny Walker Black Label, and nothing's ever going to get done because that's just the way you work. So, Yeah, I can't imagine that the private sector is going to be very keen to give you their money. Now, talking of the private sector being keen for something, MTN, the company that's currently being investigated by the Americans for potentially being the throughput where Iran sends money to South Africa in order to fund various things, where it's also been supposedly linked to potentially terrorist funding and Islamist funding. The company has also been used, apparently, according to do forms of money laundering. And the company that also Cyril Ramaphosa had an involvement with, well, anyway, that company says that they will only accept these equity equivalent investment structures if it applies equally to everybody and not just Starlink. So according to them, the whole equity equivalent investment structure could revolutionize rural internet access and create tech competition. Yes, MTN. So you couldn't have a monopoly. And they're like, yeah, let's supply this to everybody. But there is actually a fundamental problem. And this is one of the issues that no one seems to be taking into account, although Ramaphosa does because he mentioned in one of his speeches, is that by opening up this equity equivalent investment, you also potentially open up to a lot of companies, such as Chinese cheap equivalents, to come and operate in South Africa. So once you get the Chinese in your market and they undercut all of you, MTN can kiss itself goodbye. Let's move swiftly on. So Ramaphosa has urged the GNU to restore faith in democracy with the people. Now, this is obviously after the ANC have been absolutely unable to do it because they've been looting the state dry. Now, the GNU is apparently being called on by the president to restore everybody's belief in democracy. And to that, I say, Cyril, you cretin. You destroyed everybody's faith, and now you're making other people fix it for you. Now, the actual warning comes after there appears to be complete voter apathy and complete unrest. And the reason there would be voter apathy is because in many parts of the country, the ANC lost the majority. And people didn't want to see ANC policy being forced down their throat. And all the ANC had done ever since is force ANC policy down their throat. The ANC also lost its majority because people were sick and tired of seeing the ANC being useless and not being held accountable. And the ANC is still useless and not being held accountable. So you may look at it and say, well, at least the ANC are trying to rectify things. Well, no, they're not. Because the rot that was in the state, allegedly under Zuma, has just got worse under Cyril Ramaphosa. He is no better. And this brings us on to the next news story of the Higher Education Minister, who has now skipped Parliament amid backlash over HESITA board appointments. Now, for those of you who don't recall, ANC loyalists to educational boards, which were reserved for those loyalists under her pressures. Now, her no-show to account before Parliament has caused a bit of public uproar, only with opposition parties, because, let's be honest, Ramaphosa don't give a flying damn. Now, Ramaphosa has promised to address the matter personally, and we all know what that means. What? Free paid vacation? Or what are you going to do about it? Ramaphosa, nothing. You never do. In any case, moving swiftly on, South Africa's border agency, according to the latest statistics, is, broke. That means no funds for vehicles, no funds for cameras, no funds for basic education. Sure as hell no bloody funds for a border fence. Now, border officials have been forced to operate without surveillance or transport, which has posed a major risk to national security and immigration control. This is a really important story because, according to the US Treasury, an individual, a man linked to ISIS, apparently originates from South Africa. Now, this individual ran a local extortion kidnap ring and funneled money to ISIS abroad, which indicates that global jihadi groups are using South Africa as a base. And would you know it, where is one of the closest ISIS bases to South Africa? Well, it's in Mozambique, just across the border. Now, this is causing the international community to look at South Africa's lack of infrastructure, its lack of policing, in a way that says that actually South Africa is a place they need to monitor as a haven for terrorism, which means that when you go abroad, you're likely to face a hell of a lot more scrutiny than you would have before. All this thanks to the ANC's ineptness and their constant tarnishing of the South African reputation. Now that brings us on to the final news story, and this is the suggestion that actually this whole investigation that Cyril's pushing forward around the police minister, this investigation threatens to basically destroy the ANC once and for all, because the investigations could unearth the crime syndicates that have ANC involvement and how the ANC may have infiltrated police, the MPA, and the judiciary. This could include allegations of sabotage of criminal probes, assassination plots in KZN, and political protection of criminals, which may be a second echo of the Zonda-era State Capture Commission. Now, obviously, underneath Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC. Now, Cyril's obviously been the darling of the media for such a long time, and to find that the rot that we all know is right there, because we can see it in the statistics and the country's trajectory and the way that it's been pushed forward underneath Cyril, we all know it's there, and now it's going to become public. And that's just going to leave the ANC with no place left to hide. They can't just say, oh, well, Zuma, let's have Cyril. He's a great businessman. He'll fix things, because now you've had the great businessman and the savior of the country, the Ramaphoria, which is now over, and it's just as rotten as everything else that the ANC does or touches. So at the end of the day, this is now the suggestion that actually this inquiry that Cyril has initiated is most likely going to lead to the death blow of the ANC, with the findings expected to be rather explosive, which means that from my perspective, I don't think the ANC are ever going to let this see the light of day. But that's just my view. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.